wanted to show you these two images. And essentially what we're doing here is comparing two rooms. So I want to highlight how alternative solutions can potentially help people with dementia, focusing on specific design features that could potentially help with those consequences. So creating safe, comforting, and effective environments. So comparing room 1 to room 2, for example, in terms of brightness, we see that room 2 is significantly brighter and also more evenly bright than room 1. In terms, for example, of color, we see color variation in the cabinets in room 2, where white is contrasted with the wood color, versus in room 1, where it seems relatively dull, monotone, and somewhat consistent throughout the room. And in general, we also see, for example, the contrast between furniture. Room 2 has far more contrast than room 1 does. What do all these things mean? Well, essentially, decreasing unnecessary stimulation can potentially help with also minimizing how overwhelmed someone might feel in the space. And the intention of this project as well is to evaluate maybe how these design features can potentially impact somebody who has dementia and their consequences. But first, let's characterize dementia. What are some of these consequences that are going to be designed for? So we have a general loss of cognitive functioning that's pretty prevalent throughout dementia types. You have the decline in thinking, for example, which minimizes the ability of somebody to understand the gist of a paragraph. Or remembering, where somebody might not remember where they put their keys. They can't remember maybe what they were planning on doing later today. And then in terms of reasoning, maybe somebody has a decreased ability to, deduce whether there's going to be fewer staff or not during a holiday. So it's things like this that are usually impaired with somebody who has dementia. And even though there are different types, there's vascular, mixed, Alzheimer's, Huntington's, Parkinson's, it does impact the people differently. It depends on your body. It depends on the progression of the disease. And so even though some symptoms may be specific to a type of dementia, like vascular or Alzheimer's, there are other symptoms that are slightly more shared, like general memory impairment, for example. So let's talk about the diversity of the symptoms. There are many cognitive consequences ranging from emotional to physical. So how do we narrow this down? On the left side, you can see there's confusion, disorientation, difficulty handling complex tasks, memory loss, difficulty reasoning, versus with the emotion side, you have guilt, fear, anxiety, agitation, stress. All of these are extremely impactful in the life of somebody who has dementia. So creating spaces that properly help these different consequences, or maybe even manage them, could be extremely important and extremely beneficial. So what did we do? Basically, we wanted to figure out what the impact of architectural stimuli is on neuropsychological measures. So we conducted interviews and we wanted to figure out from the architect's perspective how they would design for dementia, for example. And then for the neuroscience perspective, what they think are some neuropsychological states that are potentially manipulable by design. So overall, what aspects of architecture could be applied to improve the quality of life of somebody who's living in a care home, or maybe even just a regular residence that you could apply these architectural stimuli to. So we conducted interviews and they were on average about 60 minutes. We started with 3 architects and we essentially asked them these questions, and just for time reasons, I'm not going to read them individually. You're absolutely more than welcome to look through the paper and read those more in depth. But just generally speaking, one of the architects had experience, not as the main designer necessarily, but with creating environments for dementia, whereas the other 2 were familiar with the topic, but mainly shared more speculation based on prior knowledge and prior application of certain architectural concepts. So these were some of the questions that we asked, for example, in the first half to the architect who had previously designed or had some involvement in design with architecture. And then the second half for maybe those who didn't have some form of experience in that design. And then we moved on to general questions that were asked to all of the architects, regardless of whether or not they had had experience. So like I mentioned, unfortunately, I don't have enough time to speak about all of the questions. I wish that I did. So instead, we are going to be focusing today on one specific question, which I thought was really important to cover in terms of the results. So I wanted to focus on what architects thought was the most important concept that should inform their design when creating space. And these are some of the results. These are 2 out of about 23 examples that we have in the actual paper, but I wanted to highlight these because they do reference, for example, light and multimodality, which they thought to be 2 very important concepts when it came to designing for people with dementia. And we'll see later on in the paper that a lot of these results actually demonstrated some form of connection to maybe increased neuropsychological stimuli or senses or some form of improvement. So I want to highlight, for example, in terms of light, that they mentioned that more research needs to be done on different lighting, whether it's organic, the kind of lighting, where it's situated, and what intensity, for example. Or with multimodality, you have different senses, you have sight, you have temperature, you have textures, you have sizes, everything essentially. So we replicated this as well with the neuroscientists, and there were 2 that we interviewed, one of which had slightly more experience in terms of dementia, whereas the other one had more clinical experience. However, generally they were both well-versed in the topic of dementia and they both had done reading. So in this case, if someone hadn't done reading, we wouldn't have asked the first question, but we did for both of them in this case. And then the questions from 2 to 6 were the ones that we asked basically both of them. And again, I wanted to focus on one specific question, which was the symptoms and manifestations of the disease that are especially relevant when designing for dementia. So these are some of the answers that the neuroscientists gave. We have 2 out of 9 examples here that I wanted to show you, and they kind of just reiterate the same thing that the architects had. So emphasis on sound, on light, on the different impacts that these can have from a neuropsychological perspective on the person that has dementia, how these can potentially maybe improve the state or at least maintain the state, essentially not to aggravate it. So not to create spaces that are making it worse or that increase some of these negative symptoms. So what did we conclude from these 2? Basically, we ended up narrowing down all this information to a set of salient factors in both design and neuroscience, where we were able to conduct a literature review. And that's what I'm going to explain right now. It's the bulk of the project, essentially. So here we go. This is the literature review. We did a 4x6 matrix where we essentially evaluated the key neuropsychological factors related to dementia that these architects and neuroscientists maybe mentioned. So we have on the left-hand side, alertness, stress, memorability, which can be defined into ability to recall or ability to recognize, engagement, and ability to concentrate. Now, these can all be defined in different ways, but again, we go more in depth into what the definition means pertaining to this particular project and the papers that we found. So we did find over 40 scientific papers. There's lots of data on these kinds of relationships, and it kind of just goes to advance a little bit our understanding of how these 2 relate. So how some design manipulable architectural stimuli like brightness, noise, color, and temperature can impact these neuropsychological states and measures. So basically you would see how brightness, for example, can be altered by bigger windows or by situating the room in a way that has natural sunlight, for example. So all of these considerations kind of applied into the neuropsychological perspective. These are our results. We basically ended up adding up all of these research papers and determining which ones had strong relationships, which ones maybe weren't as developed, maybe as researched. So I want to explain over here what the table means. So the dark green essentially represents strong data. So relationships, for example, like noise level, like color and alertness, where there was multiple research papers and strong evidence towards a relationship, potentially positive, potentially negative, but a relationship nonetheless. So it basically explained, for example, color increases alertness or temperature decreases alertness. And then the lighter green color covers weak data, which basically meant that there wasn't maybe too much research on it, but it kind of had been done. There was some understanding of what a relationship could be, but more research is needed. We have insignificant data, which essentially just means that it's statistically insignificant. However, they did try to research the concept. So it's not that there was no data, for example, where the relationship hadn't been discovered, which personally I thought was very surprising for brightness and ability to recall, because, for example, there's a relationship between ability to recognize and brightness. So it'd be interesting to see whether or not there was a relationship there and, maybe encourage future research to focus on that. All right, so now I'm going to be focusing on brightness versus alertness, just as an example for the kind of research that we did in this paper. So in terms of the effect of brightness on alertness, it was basically brightness measured through lux and alertness measured through the KSS, which is the Karolinska Sleepiness Scale, where a higher score of sleepiness would indicate decreased alertness. So basically what DeVries et al. Found in 2018 was that there was an 18% increase in subjective alertness from a low luminance to a high luminance condition. And we can see that in the leftmost bars because you see the decrease in sleepiness indicating an increase in alertness. And here it was 18%. And then the other effect of brightness on alertness that we found was by Smulders and DeCourt in 2014, where they found that alertness was increased by 10% in the higher lux conditions. So essentially exposing participants to a higher degree or amount of light increased their alertness. The conclusion of these two was that the longer you're in a brighter room, the bigger the positive effect on alertness. So specifically when they were in the 30 minutes for one of the conditions, it was a 10% increase versus in the other experiment, it was 90 minutes and found an 18% increase. So it's this kind of data that we researched and evaluated basically in our paper. And we have 18 more findings like this. So there's a lot of material, a lot of data to go through. And while the hope is that it will inspire or motivate other people and researchers to investigate on topics that maybe aren't as recognized, as understood, or maybe there's a relationship there that we don't know about yet. So future implications, what does this mean? What's the intention of the paper? Well, like I mentioned at the very beginning, it's affiliated with the Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture. So hopefully it would go on that website as an article for the wiki, at which point an architect or neuroscientist could potentially read this project and again, maybe get motivated, start their own research project, maybe read about different connections, different relationships. And then maybe if you're an architect, you would be able to understand a novel feature that could potentially impact, again, awareness or stress or ability to recognize. And basically you'd be able to see what that kind of connection is and maybe reach out to a neuroscientist or do research of your own. But the intention was to basically collect this data, analyze it, provide research papers, conduct the interviews, and present the information in a way that makes it accessible, basically, to bridge this gap between neuroscience and architecture. Ultimately asking this question, are we effectively designing environments for people living with dementia? Are we creating these spaces for them and to help them potentially minimize or help with the consequences of dementia, which, as we saw earlier, are definitely not good. And we want to minimize, decrease that as much as possible. So I want to thank Professor David Kirsch, of course, for all of his help throughout this project. I want to thank everybody in the honors program as well, Professor Chiba and Serafina Solders for their participation, everybody who I conducted interviews on, and overall, just thank you to everyone for being here today. And if anyone has any questions, please feel